Hey, thanks for tuning in to the video. This one is about who owns what and what happens to it when you die. We call this a life and death workshop for not only LGBT couples, but unmarried couples and families as well. Welcome. I'm Brana Williams.
I'm Ryan Stampfle.
And we are the partners at Indigo Family Law. We practice in Surfside Beach. We have a family law practice that our job is to protect your family now and in the future. So we handle divorces, custody actions, things of that nature, and then we do estate plans, trust plans, that kind of thing for the future. All right? So let's get right to it. What happens if you're not married and you die and you have children? Because that is very prominent in our society today.
Brana, you don't want to get blindsided after a death or incapacity of a loved one. Being prepared is the best way to avoid that happening. Have absolute faith in your partner and children. Having absolute faith that your partner and children will be cared for gives you peace of mind today, and make sure that what you want after you're gone happens.
And the thing is, Ryan, what I think a lot of folks don't realize is the law recognizes if you're married. The law does not recognize if you're not married.
And when we started doing this initially, things were quite a bit different for LGBT families. But since LGBT and same-sex marriage has been recognized, everyone's kind of in the same boat. If you're married, there's a lot of protections out there for you. But if you're not, the law puts you in a very awkward position.
So what we decided to do is have this seminar to try to help folks learn about how you can feel secure knowing that you'll be taken care of the way you want to be and that your children will be taken care of the way you want them to be taken care of. What are we going to cover?
We're going to cover what's going to happen if something happens to you or a loved one, what legal documents that you need to have in place to make sure that your wishes are carried out.
And how you can go about getting those, okay? So let's jump right into it. Let's talk about what happens right now if you're not married.
Well, the first thing you need to know is, are you registered domestic partners? Are you married under state law? Or are you relying on agreements that may not be recognized by law?
What would happen now if you were to pass and you're not married, but you have a child with your partner?
If you have a child with your partner, your child stands to inherit from you, but your partner does not. Without the proper documentation put into place, that person really has no status in your estate.
What happens if you have children and you're not married and you die?
Brana, if you have children, you're not married, and you die, they stand to inherit property from you, but your partner doesn't and may not have any control over those things. It's also important to know whether or not that child has been legitimized. Is there a court order in place? Has the child been legally adopted?
Well, let's talk about that. This is what we'd say. Let's say, and here's where it is a difference. If you're a male and a female versus an LGBT couple, okay? If you're a male and a female and you're the biological mom and the biological father of the child, then it is very relatively easy for the biological folks to go get custody of a child, okay? It's not so if you're not a biological parent, i.e., you could have a child, we could have been living together, I've raised this child, but I technically have no say-so. I'm not biologically related. Then what do I do?
I don't necessarily have an answer to that. What do we do in that situation? Help me out. What's the answer to that question?
Well, and this is why we do this, because here's the deal. We've had cases where we've had same-sex couples have babies, but they didn't adopt, and then they go to get a divorce. Or same-sex couples have a baby, and one dies. If you are not a parent of a child, and that's a loose term, then you're subject to go into court. What happens in that scenario? You have a child, I've raised it, but your parents come in and say, look, you're not blood.
Well, what you first have to do is you have to have a court then determine, are you a parent? You haven't gone and done that legally before that person has passed. So you first have to get that determination, and then you may have to fight off other family members or perhaps even a biological parent to take care of the child that you've raised and cared for.
Yeah, and that's what's so important. That's why we wanted to do this little workshop, if you will, so you can understand these things happen. They happen. They have happened. We've had clients that have gone through this. So we want to make sure that we talk about what are the options. Look, we've got to talk about on the short term. If something happens, and I think it's real important for people to understand, especially in our transient society today, lots of times you're down here and your family's somewhere else, okay? So you want your mom to be the one if something happens to you to take care of your child, but she's in, California. Well, she can't get here when that wreck happened, or she can't get here when this immediate thing happened. So we look at what happens on the short term, and then we look at what happens on the long term.
The best way to do that is to make sure that your wishes are properly recorded.
Yeah, and you do that by a plan, okay? There's something else I want you guys to consider too. When you're not married, but you've built a life together, and one person dies, if you don't have the documents in place, your partner is not going to inherit. By law, the law says that if you're married, your spouse inherits, and if you have children, your child can inherit. It doesn't say anything about a partner. So your partner can be completely left out, okay?
So if you choose not to be married to your partner, a will, a trust, and making sure that non-probate assets like investment accounts, insurance policies, make that the people you want to inherit those, or the people you want to receive those assets, the documentation needs to be in place to secure that.
The other part of that, the flip side, we don't even think about, what if it's a child? It's a child you've raised. You're that child's dad. I have a child, we've been together 20 years, 25 years. You're the only dad that child has known, but we never did an adoption. Technically the child is not biologically yours. So if you died without a will and didn't let that child inherit from you, it goes elsewhere. That's what the law determines, So if you have a child that you're raising, you need to make sure you take care of that child as well.
People often want to protect stepchildren, and the only way to really do that is to make sure the proper documentation is in place.
That's correct. And it goes back to, if you don't have a will, what happens, okay? If we're together and we're not married, then neither of us inherit from the other person. It goes by what the law says happened.
The law calls that intestate succession. It's a big word, meaning that the law has decided who gets what and in what order.
Lots of times you got to realize that a will isn't quite enough either. We recall like when Anna Nicole Smith died, and remember the whole big deal with Harold Stern out there, and the Howard Stern, which was whatever, and claiming to be the child's daddy, and he was the one that had been that child's life for 6, 8, 9 months, and then lo and behold, he wasn't the biological father. And we know now that little child is with her biological father, not with the person who Anna Nicole designated in her will and who had been raising that child. And that can happen. It's real. It did happen. There's another consideration that I want people to understand is when you do probate, things are public, okay? If you're going to inherit, one of the things you have to, when you die, one of the things you have to do is you have to file an inventory. And the inventory is everything that's in your asset. And in your estate. So everything's out there. They know that this person's going to inherit, and here's what they're going to inherit, which in effect can make them targets for things.
One of the things we can do to help prevent that is by using trust documents, and also by making sure that certain assets that may not have to go to in your estate, things I've already talked about, insurance policies, investment accounts, that you have those documents filled out properly, so that it can avoid the entire probate process and the public nature of that probate process.
Listen, it happens a lot. Every day, unmarried partners are shut out by well-meaning family members, okay? We see it. We see it in our practice. I've seen it with some friends, and it's not fun, and that's a bad time. And so the things you can do to take care of the person that you love, the child that you love, okay, that they can be handled. How do we fix those?
We call it a kids protection plan. Kids protection plan outlines what you want to have happen with your children, what you want them to receive and how you want them to receive it. It can include a will and trust to make sure that those assets are protected from the person receiving them. It's usually not a good idea to hand young children, 18, 19 years old, sometimes sizable amounts of money. The intent for most people is to make sure that those last and that they can provide for them in the future. And we can help do that through a trust plan, part of our kids protection plan.
One of the things that we think is very important too is we have a tendency, what we do is do what we call a priceless interview. And the priceless interview lets you as a parent talk about your values, your insights, your stories, so that they're shared. It's especially important in this because we did this thing just to talk about unmarried couples and LGBT couples because you just have no protection under the law. You really just don't. And so we want everybody to be aware of the risk that you're taking and that there are methods out there by which you can fix this.
I think it's the old adage, ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
So that's what we want to make sure that happens. We want to make sure that you think about what happens if something happens to you, what happens to your money, what happens to your children. Who's going to take care of your children? Is it going to be your partner? You know, unfortunately, we have seen it today, like I said, in same-sex couples who have children, and obviously they're not biologically both of them's children. And if the adoption did not happen and that both people's name are not on the birth certificate, it's problems waiting to happen. So just make sure you think about these things.
Our goal is for you to be able to pass on more than just your assets, more than just your money. We want to help you pass on your values, your morals, your spiritual assets, some of your cherished memories. Part of our kids protection plan includes a video program in which you can lay these things out for your family members so that they understand and they know why you made the choices that you made, and maybe some things about you that you didn't really want to express to them while you were still here.
We want to make sure that your family remembers you the way you want them to remember you and that your child knows you. So, you know, when you are more than just your money, you're more than just your assets. You have a whole legacy to leave, and that's what we want to make sure is taken care of. So give us a call, let us know. We will want to help you, okay? And we are glad you watched us.
Thank you.